Hello and welcome to the CDAIO magazine interview series. In this special edition, we interview Group Chief Data Officers to explore the why, the how, and the what of data and AI of large companies. My name is Julian Schirmer, co-founder of OEO and academic director for executive programs on data and AI at HEC Paris. And today we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Fabian Winter, Group CDO of the reinsurer Munich Re. Welcome, Fabian. It's really great to have you with us today.
Hi, Julian. It's a pleasure for me.
Fabian, perhaps to get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your role? What is your background? Who are you? That we're gonna spend some time with you today.
Yeah, sure. I joined Munich Re in 2009, and at this time, the company was looking for somebody building up what they call predictive modeling. So taking data-driven decisions, especially for health insurance business in 2009. And since then, I'm engaged into the journey of Munich Re, and I have initiated a lot of things which we have now in our group, all around data analytics, and now it's also all about AI. And I think since a couple of months, I'm also called not a chief AI officer of Munich Re, so not the chief data officer, but also the chief AI officer. My academic background is I'm a statistician, so therefore I somehow have a background at least in statistical modeling, and this kind of stuff. I think that's still helpful, even if we are not discussing the GLM stuff that much anymore, but it's still helpful to have a solid statistical education or something like that. I still like it, and I still have when we hire people, I still have a tendency also going for this more mathematical statistical profiles.
Which is actually quite interesting, right? Because we see more and more people in the CDO roles who have a business background actually for managing information. So I think having true mathematicians being that role is really fantastic to have. I think especially in insurance context, obviously quite important. So I'm really looking forward to this interview because I believe that not many people are familiar with the reinsurance industry, right? It's something that's a little bit hidden to most of the people. And I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from this industry. So, to get us started, I think it would make sense to have a quick introduction into the reinsurance world. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit on perhaps a high level, what is the business model of a reinsurer, and perhaps contrasted it with traditional insurance companies that we are more familiar with?
Sure. And I think it's a very I hear this question quite frequently because, of course, people have no interaction with a reinsurer, right? Which is, by the way, a kind of obstacle we have to overcome when we do recruiting. Yeah, because people might know technology companies, people might know large primary insurance companies. Because you can somehow interact with all of these companies. You know products of them. You know their insurance and offerings and so on. But as a reinsurer is at the end the insurer of insurers. Our clients are insurance companies. We are exclusively doing B2B business, and therefore we are for the size of our book and for the size of our company, we are at least in the normal population quite unknown, you could say. Yeah? So reinsurance, as I said, is the insurance of insurers. And that also means that we have, let's say, different challenges than a normal insurer. While a normal insurer is quite enthusiastic on optimizing client interactions and client journeys. So how can I get in contact? These are elements which are normally completely not relevant for a reinsurance company, right? And normally you could also say, if you put it very black and white, which is not true, of course, because black and white is never true, you could say while the primary insurer is more dealing with the frequency of risk, so he has a lot of life insurance policies, a lot of health insurance policies, a lot of motor policies in his book. The reinsurer maybe from a deals more with a smaller number of more complex risk structures.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that has a number of implications when we talk about data, AI, and analytics needs, maybe in a couple of minutes.
I think this is exactly what you say. It's super interesting to get this different perspective, right? Because usually you have a company always focusing on efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. And you have basically, you don't have time to really take the right decisions and to spend a lot of time with that. But in your context, you're saying, well, there's a couple of key decisions that are really critical, and we're going to spend a lot of time about that. Is really exciting to see that. And so how would you say in this context that you are framing, how is data and AI playing a role within this logic of business?
That is, by the way, Julian, also argument for many of the data scientists, which really love to work with us, so in the reinsurance
I can
industry,
imagine.
because we can spend more time on understanding causal relations, and we can we invest a lot of time in understanding causality, and we are not, coming back to my statistical background, we are not exclusively triggered by correlation. Correlation versus causality, I think, is a big one. Yeah, that has several implications. That means that our data is very heterogeneous. Yeah, so if you're not dealing with a high frequency of homogeneous risk, but with a lower frequency of heterogeneous risk, then your data landscape is very heterogeneous. You have a high percentage within your data of unstructured data, because if you think about complex risk, the risk evaluation or also loss reports are very long, detailed textual documents. So therefore, this is not maybe comparable with what you would get when you have a simple car accident. And we have, as we are underwriting complex risk, we have a special need to combine data science know-how with subject matter expertise. Yeah, so for example, our underwriters might be engineers, or our underwriters might be physicians. So we have somehow to organize that the medical person or the engineer somehow is also equipped with basic instruments in data science, because the data scientist normally does not bring the subject matter expertise to the table. So one of the challenges is now, how do we combine or how do we smartly combine the subject matter expertise, which a reinsurer like Munich Re has built up over decades or more than 100 years, you could say, with these new abilities and new skills in data science. That does some kind of other challenges than you would see in primary insurance. And as you can imagine, for the primary insurer, is in the primary insurance industry, it's much about efficiency. It's much about client interaction. In the reinsurance industry, it's much about selecting the right risk. So taking the right risk decisions is very, very important. Therefore, also when we talk about data, when we talk about AI, our focus is maybe more on underwriting, on the underwriting decision, also on the quality of the decision, than maybe other insurance segments, you could say.
And would you say, Fabian, because this what you're describing here is actually quite the usual thing that you have a challenge since ever, right? How to take
Mm.
the right decisions and so on. Would you see a certain development with data and AI which has somehow changed the role of data and AI in this? Because obviously taking the right decisions was way before I was so
Yeah, yeah.
prominent established.
Yeah, that's true. And here maybe primary and reinsurance are very similar, because all of us in the insurance industry have a long history in creating risk models on mainly internal structured data. I think that is the world where we are coming from. So we had and then decades ago, we started using structured external data, so data which you can buy about attributes of a building, attributes of company data sets. Company data is still very important for us, as you can imagine. While the latest developments in AI around language model now, of course, open up the world for leveraging everything which is unstructured. Internal unstructured data, and for internal unstructured data, the primary industry, but also the reinsurance industry has started some years ago with, at the beginning, quite, let's say, simple methods like keyword extraction. Yeah, so you extract, for example, a diagnosis code from a medical record, because a diagnosis code followed by ICD coding, for example, has a certain structure, and out of the code we know the diagnosis. Yeah, so that are techniques which have been used long before the large language models have came up. But therefore, so the insurance industry has a long tradition in analyzing structured internal data. It has elements where it also uses external structured data since a while, for example, for marketing campaigns. And it has started a couple of years ago with natural language processing, or simple keyword extraction, as I've said. Also, more and more using these simpler techniques to extract information out of internal unstructured data. What it could not use in the past were the largest part of information, which is normally unstructured and external. So more or less everything which you could find in the World Wide Web, for example. And when we talk about the opportunities for our business model, it's a lot about also using these kind of information sources for better risk assessment.
And I could imagine that this is actually quite challenging, right? Because if you say we're going to use now AI technologies, and especially when we look about Gen AI, and then you come with hallucination elements and you try to use these types of technologies, what would you say are a couple of challenges that you face of leveraging data and AI in a meaningful way in this context where it's really about making the optimal decisions and where quality is so critical?
Yeah, first of all, at least in the reinsurance industry, I actually don't believe that in the very near future AI can take decisions. Yeah, AI at the moment is in a position to support the experts, to support the underwriter. The final decision in our business is taken by a human. It's taken by underwriter, and the AI can give him hints, can give him signals, can help him to optimize certain steps, for example, in wording comparisons that could become very powerful. And we also have to understand that all this AI technology, especially when it's all about generative AI, large language model, these kind of latest AI developments, is at its very beginning, right? So it's still it's a very early phase of that technology, but this will become better over time. And we already see developments such as agent-based architectures, where we maybe in the future can successfully combine the very broad but very unspecific knowledge within a large language model. So the LLM knows a lot, but it's very unprecise. You talk about giving out wrong informations or something like that, with smaller but more precise information sources. For example, data which is already in the company, or rule-based systems which have been used as expert systems in the last decades. And one of the challenges will be how you combine these kind of data sources, because we also understood now, dealing with large language models, that the large language models at the moment stand alone. If you just would send a prompt to a large language model, you might not get a good answer, and it might not solve your problem. So therefore, these architectures, how to combine these different information sources, internally structured, externally structured, internally unstructured, and externally unstructured, have to become smarter from my perspective.
I think that's a very refreshing view, because often I don't know how it goes for you, but often you go to an XCOM and I have to teach a couple of XCOMs, and then they say, yeah, can we just do Gen AI now and forget about the rest? This is the only thing we want to do. Then we need to educate again. We need to see this more holistically. And how do we build up exactly what you say, right? How can we rethink the organization structure of combination of agents as well in the organization? What can they do? What is the interface with humans? So perhaps in this context, could you give us, perhaps as a last question on why it's so important, could you give us an example of a use case where you leverage data and AI to get us a more concrete understanding?
Yeah, so generally we are using, as I said, we are using data and AI since decades. Examples are, for example, in medical underwriting for life and health business. But when it comes and here it's about how do we come from structured data to a decision or to a recommendation for medical underwriter, but also how can we how will it become or how will the technology, for example, large language models, help us to extract, for example, more relevant medical information out of medical records? Yeah, so that is an example from life and health, and from non-life. And examples are um, in wording, as I said, wording can be is a very classical field, I would say, where the fact that the large language models can understand already parts of a contract, or in the future maybe even a complete contract, and you might, and in reinsurance, that wordings are very tailor-made, so the wordings look different from contract to work contract, of course, but they all have to fulfill certain criteria which are normally somehow described in guidelines. So a comparison between a wording and a larger number of guidelines which are relevant to take into account is a second example, I would say.
Thank you very much for sharing. I think what is really exciting to see is this crystal clear focus on why it really matters, right? It's saying really it's about the quality of decisions we have to take and what this then means in organizations. So I think that's something that we can learn from a lot of organizations, because very often I see organizations going in all sorts of directions, but not having a clear idea why data and AI really contributes to the essence of the business that they are in. So I think this is really exciting. So thank you very much. We see you the next time on exploring then the how does Munich Re leverage which data products to build its future. Very much looking forward to that. Thank you very much, Fabian, for joining us this time.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks a lot.